Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for my Tokyo Ordnance M4A3E4 Sherman tank. Since the last video, tools have been used on the model surface and the cutting has commenced. And when I mean cutting, I mean a lot of cutting. In terms of cutting, grinding, as well as amputating. All three are going to be seen in access in this video. If you like to see things get cut up, then this is going to be the video for you. Let's go ahead and kick this one off. Alright, starting this video off is exactly where we last left off in the previous video, where the model is now about to head into construction. Since the previous video, I went ahead and I'm getting the model ready to take it outdoors because there's going to be a lot of hacking and cutting and plastic surgery being done to this. And interestingly enough, just like a real plastic surgeon, I went ahead and with a Sharpie needed to mark off the various things that have to be done in terms of either a straight up amputation or some modification. This is in contrast to just coming up with a standard to-do list, which oddly enough is something else that I actually do on my builds. It helps keep things organized, but the to-do list is one great thing to do. However, when you actually physically see things on the project, it gives you a good visual cue, and it's a way to line up your procedures and your to-do list in a way that's a bit more efficient compared to just writing things down on a piece of paper or in a notepad or something. The one thing though that you really need to do when you're taking on a project is definitely not just go from your thoughts or just from your memory. That's a bad way to do things because with a project like this, there's so much steps and procedures that need to be done that you could potentially forget one. And although that might sound absurd, trust me, when you are really deep into the weeds, it doesn't take too much to forget a procedure or a detail or two, and it's something that could potentially bite you later on as the build continues. So it's a good idea to organize the things accordingly. Granted, I've done a number of these type of builds at this point, so this is basically just slipping into a good pair of clothes that you've worn many, many times. Either way, though, even though I've done all that, I'm still going to go ahead and mark the things accordingly and come up with a to-do list off camera. But anyway, over here you can see exactly what needs to be done. On the turret over here, I went ahead and marked the amount of material that needs to be amputated away, and that's going to allow the piece to then bend down to the appropriate height for the high bustle. I slashed out sections that are just going to be straight up amputated or put up an X on pieces that are going to be amputated. On the hull itself, same exact thing was done. Now this is just a preliminary. Obviously I got to do things like etch in the panel lines here and things along those lines, but you get a basic idea on what exactly is going to transpire when I actually start cutting into this thing. Definitely the front here is going to have a whole lot of that. A lot of X's that you can see. So you can clearly see exactly how the build is going to, or how I'm envisioning the build process. The very next thing I'm going to do, however, is to get this thing taken outside where I can hit it with the hose and some detergent so I can clean this thing, because this thing is filthy. That may sound counterintuitive. Perhaps I should have did that before I went ahead and started doing all the marking. And some people would even say, well, you should do that after the cutting, i.e. the washing. But one thing about these rotomold models, or rotomold material in general, is that it doesn't create any powder like most other materials out there. It's a very clean material in that regard. Like in contrast, fiberglass, that stuff you better wear a good mask. I'm not talking about those piece of crap dollar store particle masks. No. You need a decent respirator when you're working with fiberglass because that stuff loves to become airborne at its earliest convenience, specifically the second a tool touches it. So that's definitely something that is a bit different. Also, some plastics and even some, these days, 3D print materials, they can also start producing some particulate when you are cutting and sanding, and rotomold doesn't really do that. It just creates more or less chunks as opposed to like fine dust. So that's one thing about it, which is why washing it now is not really any different if I go ahead and wash it after the cutting. And you know what? When I start with the actual cutting and grinding, you'll definitely see what I'm referring to. However, unfortunately, as much as I would love to take this thing outside and wash it right now, I can't. It's currently nighttime, so first thing in the morning, I know what I have to do. One other thing to mention about this dust, this is that really nasty, sticky dust where it just doesn't come off. Even if you blast it with the hose, it's just not going to wash off that easily. This is the type of stuff that you're going to have to hit it with a little bit of detergent and possibly even some elbow grease in order to dislodge it. Here we are the next day. Unfortunately, it's hella windy. Hopefully the microphone isn't just winded out, but you can see the tank outdoors. I'm going to go ahead and wash it. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to throw on some detergent over here from the kitchen. Up on the outside, squirt a little on the inside. All right, it's a quick drizzle. That's all you really need. From now, I'm going to hit it with the hose. I'm going to start with a shower, and just to get the soap thoroughly all over the body, and then from there, hit it with something a little bit more direct. Don't forget to hit the insides, because that is equally as filthy as the outside. Alright, now that the pre-rinse is done, let me go ahead and hit it with the jet. Because of the Flintstones hole on the bottom of the hull, it makes draining the water pretty easy. At least for now. That is most certainly subject to change. One thing's for certain, the soap did a good job dislodging all that cruddy dust that was on the surface. Excellent. Let me just finish up with the turret, and then I can go ahead and start cutting. Alright, that's clean enough. In the sun here, let this guy dry out. Let me go and get ahead and get the cutting tools. With the tank outdoors, I have here my full arsenal of tools and equipment that are going to be utilized for the next few procedures. All these tools here are going to be used to cut, grind, and amputate sections from this model in order to get it ready for the next step, which will be the actual rebuild. Here I have the Multi-Master. I believe I may have mentioned that before in a few other videos, or even in this video perhaps. Awesome tool. It's great for working on these type of models. I have here an angle grinder with an angle disc on it, a Dremel with a router bit, as well as also a high-speed removal bit. This may or may not be necessary, but I'm just hedging my bets here. I have here my palm sander with some 150 grit sandpaper, and a new member to the arsenal, which is this Harbor Freight Warrior branded handheld belt sander. We had an old Black & Decker belt sander for a number of years. My father bought it back in 2001. However, it still works if I could find it somewhere in the shop. It's underneath one of the benches, and it's easier just to find another one. Besides, that one's kind of really old now. So here we go. Some people are probably going to scoff at the brand, think it sucks or whatever, but hey, you know what? Let's see what damage I can do with it. It's 30 bucks, and for the purposes of this build here, I think it should be just fine. But again, that's subject to change. Some other bits of equipment, of course, would be some safety equipment. Here's my respirator. I'm going to be wearing this. Although the rotomold material doesn't kick up nearly as much particulate, say, as fiberglass or even plastic, it still kicks up material nonetheless. And either way, I really don't want that crap in my lungs. So to quote the old guy from the Blend Tech, Will It Blend videos, don't breathe this. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this on. A pair of safety glasses would also be helpful, although I personally don't wear safety glasses. However, this is one application where don't do what I'm doing. Wear safety glasses. Protect yourself. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin. One thing I do want to say when it comes for removing the molded in side skirt rail, the angle grinder is great because of this guard over here. It actually acts as a perfect ledge, and you can just set the piece on here and the blade can do all the work. And this is the type of crud that you're going to get built up when you're grinding these things with an angle grinder. As you can see, the material is still very, very durable. In fact, the palm sander is probably, of all the tools, is going to have the most difficult time with actually trying to sand and polish this thing down. But it can still be done nonetheless. Either way, just a data point to keep in mind if you never worked with this material before. Alright, let's see. Alright, that did a really great job. Ah, something's stinging me. Okay, that did a really great job with obliterating that thick, chunky molded in line. Definitely sets the stage for the refinement that still needs to be done, which will be done in later steps. But great step so far. Alright, let me go ahead, flip around, and do the opposite side. But no point getting that on video. Before I do that, one thing that I did notice, when I was grinding this down, some sparks were shooting out of this thing. Amazing, because there's no metal at all in this piece. It's 100% pure plastic. So as for how metal is sparking up, I don't know, maybe the blade is making contact with the guard and sparking up that way. But either way, it was interesting seeing a spark or two shoot out from the blade, or the spinning disc. Either way, not much of a concern. I still have plenty of this to do the job, and I do have extras in the shop. So there's really nothing stopping me from finishing this off tonight. Alright, that's it with the grinding for now. I'm going to switch over to the Multimax and start doing some other amputations. Alright, still grabbing somewhere. I'm pretty sure this looks horrific to some people watching this right now. But welcome to a rotomold. Anyway, let me continue. Also, if you notice, the Multi-Max does not create any airborne particulate. It just creates just a little bit of ooze around where the cutting blade does its thing. Because that, you don't really need to wear a mask when you're going ahead and cutting this stuff with the Multi-Master. With the angle grinder, a bit of a different story. One thing I love about the Multi-Max, it's awesome for cutting out square panels like the rear engine hatch over here. With the shape here of the blade, if you notice when I get to the end point, I stop and I actually just rotate it like this. And as you can see, it eats away just the right amount of material for me to plunge into and cut out the corner without there being any sort of overcut. This is something that is more likely to happen if you use some kind of a cutting disc, like on a Dremel or on an angle grinder. Oh, and with the way the engine deck is molded, we do have these lines that are entirely molded in and acts as a great little channel and guide, and the blade just almost naturally wants to follow these sections. And that makes my job a little bit easier. No fuss, no muss. In the past, I would go ahead and keep these and salvage them by cutting out the grills and fabricating my own. However, thanks to 3D printing and my catalog set of grills, these are no longer going to be required. I still need to etch the remainder panels, but I think I'm going to do that at a later date. Right now, I'm still going to focus on more amputation. If I'm going to cut this off, I'm just going to go ahead and maybe cut off the entire engine deck section. Nah, I think I could go ahead and salvage this. I kind of need the structure over here. As I mentioned before, this thing does a great job with cutting this material. The only problem it has is that this thing gets hot after a while. Fortunately, I'm switching tools, so it could rest for a little bit. Alright, time to make some dust. Mask up, power on. Woo, boy, that's hot as fuck. Woo! God damn, that was hot. Yeah, one thing you do have to watch out for is potentially getting burned. Not from the tool, oddly enough, from the molten plastic. This thing gets so hot when it's cutting with a cutting disc that the plastic liquefies, and if it gets stuck to your hand, it kind of becomes like napalm. Holy crap, that stuff impossible to get off until it just cools off, or you quench it in some water. Then you just peel it off like a little piece of, just like a little piece of dried up glue. However, it hurts like hell. I forgot about that with these rotomolds. Whoo, boy. I'm gonna put my hand in some water. Right back. Alright, well, that gave me a nice little first-degree burn. Oh well. The sacrifices I make for my collection. Alright, I'll manage. Alright, here we go. While I'm changing out the router bit, you can see just how effective the router bit is at eating through this material. It cuts through really like a hot knife through butter, and it doesn't create any real airborne particulate. It's just big chunky stuff like you see here. Switching now to the high-speed removal bit, which I'm going to use to hog out the molded in fuel filler caps. Alright, well, looks like I finished just in the nick of time. It's getting really dark, but it's dusk, and also there's a storm rolling on in. So it's best that I go ahead and bring all the power tools on the inside. The model, I went ahead and put the hull in the grass, hit it with the hose to wash out any sort of particulate that's left from the cutting. Obviously, there's quite a bit. And you can see as a byproduct how much crap was cut away from the initial cutting process of this build. Remember, this is just the hull. The turret also has got to get a bit of cutting as well. But you get a good idea on exactly how much amputation and grinding needs to be done on one of these examples. It's also why you can see I kind of waited for the warmer summer months to go ahead and start this project, because this is definitely something that you need to do outdoors, because this crap on the inside of the shop, yeah, it's definitely not something I really want to go ahead and start cleaning up. So outdoors is the best when you're starting something like this. With the now freshly washed hull back into the shop, you can see what the current status is of the model, or at least what's left of it, some people would probably argue. And I could see some people out there, some naysayers or some people who have never seen my other work before, see what went on here, and they're saying to yourself, holy hell, what did you do? You done goofed. This thing is screwed. To which I have to say you have little faith, and also you need to watch some of my other videos, namely my 105 Sherman video, which is one of these models over here. In order to go ahead and get the model built up to its full potential, you need to get to the bottom floor. Rock bottom, the bedrock, the foundation. And this here is the hull at its foundation. Everything that is superfluous, or just about everything that needed to go, is gone. The blocks here on the lower hull for where the suggestion points for mounting the VVSS, gone. The entire rear plate, gone. The front fender work, gone. Those big chunky molded-in sections, gone. And of course the engine deck and also all of the rear detail fittings needed to go. These were all aspects of the model that were holding it back. With these sections all completely amputated, just wiped clean, at this point here we can now rebuild. The only revision that still needs to be done in terms of grinding away plastic is to clean up these areas here where the fuel caps once were, etch the lines of the rear engine deck section, as well as also revise the front bow hatch well area. If anyone saw the last Jumbo video, that is going to be basically mirrored on this example over here with the exact same type of procedures. But I need to have the hatches in hand, and I need to be focusing on the hatches in order to properly remove the right amount of material in the right locations in order to facilitate that job. So, needless to say, that's going to be a topic for another video. The center hole for the turret also needs to be cleaned up a bit. It's a bit jagged from when the original plate was cut away by Mr. DeSimone when the model was originally shipped to the original owner. And, well, that's it from there. As you can see, there's a lot of gaping holes now left on the hull, on the rear deck section, as well as, like I mentioned before, for instance, we have an entire no firewall section. That needs to be fixed. So at this point here, again, this is rock bottom, this is the foundation, and now it's the perfect, or just about the perfect point in order to build up from. Tool-wise, as you saw, I used most of the tools. Oddly enough, the new belt sander I didn't use at this time, but I have a feeling I'm going to be needing it for the next procedure when it comes time for reskinning the lower hull and replating it, plugging up all of the holes that are remaining on the lower section. But again, that remains to be seen, and that's obviously going to be discussed in another video. You can probably see now why these models had a somewhat dubious reputation that they had back in the day, and also probably today, I would argue, if people would encounter them. A lot of people, by the way, would not go this far with the cut-up. They just wouldn't. Most people would stop well before the way that I went with this one here. And that's totally fine if you want to work within your skill sets. Me, I have the skill sets. In fact, I actually pioneered doing this to these James DeSimone vehicles and plastic Panzer vehicles by extension. So for me, it's like a duck to water. On a similar note, if I'm not mistaken, I believe a lot of these changes were made on the plastic Panzers version of the M4A3 re-release. However, I've yet to work on one of those, so I can't say heads or tails on that. But I remember him saying that he made some alterations to the kit to make it better suited for model makers. As for what those entail, not sure. Not really sure how viable that even is, or if I have to do basically the same type of work to that. But at some point in time, a plastic Panzers James DeSimone Sherman will come across my desk, and when it does, I'll do something cool with it. Going back to what I stated before, you can see exactly why in the 1/6 scale modeling community, a lot of people didn't really know what they were getting into when they got one of these models, or they didn't really know how to take it from its original condition and really go all the way with it. Most of the people back then, like I said in the other video, They were just used to working with the 21st Century Toys M5 Stuart, where you get a big box, you pop it open, pull it out, the thing's already painted, snap on some kit supply tools, the MG, and call it a day. Also, if you're a traditional plastic model builder, you're working with Tamiya's, Dragon kits, yeah, something like this is definitely, again, not going to be something that you're going to be used to. It's well outside the comfort zones of both of those individuals, and most of the hobby were at the time made up of those type of individuals. So you can see again why something like this was definitely outside of their comfort zone. However, me, on the other hand, whoa, totally the opposite. I saw this and I'm like, oh, this is where the fun begins. This is where I come alive. This is where you see the biggest smile and grin from ear to ear on my face when I have a model at this point here, because this is where the model really begins to blossom into something that is really what it's meant to be. And this here is, again, the starting phases of that. This is something that I've mentioned several times back in the day on the old forum posts, or even I may have mentioned it on some of the older YouTube videos on subjects similar to this, but models like this cannot be referred to as a kit. You really can't call this a kit. Calling it a kit, in my opinion, is definitely not fair to what this thing is, and it gives the wrong opinion in people's minds on what they're getting into. A kit, specifically in 1/6 scale, would be the Dragon Panzer II or the Dragon Sherman. Those are straight up kits. You get a box of runners with parts on them, you snip them off, assemble it, and you could basically just build the tank complete with the out-of-the-box components. This doesn't qualify as that, in my opinion. This here is what I like to refer to as an assisted scratch build. It truly is. What this thing gives you is it gives you a properly scaled hull and turret. That's it. It saves you the time in having to scratch build the hull and, more importantly, the turret. The turret on these Shermans are actually quite hard to scratch build. I'm talking about no 3D printing back in the day with old school techniques. The round turret was something that's a bit challenging. The hull also is a bit challenging because you have a lot of angles and slopes, and you have some bulbous areas to try to scratch build. And these all take a lot of time in order to size up, cut, and then get everything fitted together. What these hulls do is that it cuts you off at the pass, and you're at the point then where you can start detailing out. In my opinion, the only thing that's similar to this are, believe it or not, radio-controlled ships. A lot of radio-controlled ship models out there, from like the Scale Shipyard, 32nd Peril was one that came to mind, where you get a fiberglass hull, and you get some kind of an object that resembles a turret or a superstructure or a conning tower if it's a submarine. That is what these are like. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, if you've been in the subcommittee back in the day, I'm dating myself here. Yeah, when you see those models from Scale Shipyard, that's it. You just get an amorphous shape of a Gato or a Ballo, and then you have an amorphous shape of a conning tower, and maybe some resin dive planes, and maybe a propeller to go with it, and that's it. You are off to the races. And that is what we have here, which is why I was able to take to these so well back in the day, because I grew up with those type of models, watching my father and helping my father build those type of builds back in the 90s. So something like this, I had no problem taking to it like a duck to water. And it's also funny whenever these models also give you a bit of a thicker skin, and you get to appreciate just plastic model kits a little bit more. And it's always funny whenever I'm online or on a Facebook group or in a YouTube video and I see some modeling elitist, some gatekeeper be like, well, this kit just has too much flash, or the detailing is just not good enough. Yeah, it's like that. Like, that's very adorable now, is it? Like, that's cute. That's cute. Specifically, when I see some of these individuals refer to the Dragon Sherman, I remember I just had on one of the Facebook groups, I even mentioned, because some guy was literally saying that the Dragon Sherman kit's just a under-detailed disaster, and it's more of a toy than a tank itself. And frankly, what I said was, what the Dragon Sherman is, it's actually awesome. It's a great value. If you've never scratch built a 1/6 scale model before, or if you've never worked with a model like this, the Dragon Sherman, you'll just not understand exactly how awesome the Dragon Sherman is. It gives you so much value for your money. And you could see after what I'm going through over here, that when those Dragon Shermans came out, it was like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. The Dragon Sherman gives you a really nice upper, a nice lower, an excellent turret, and most importantly, it gives you a decent set of running gear. That is the hardest part to scratch build on any 1/6 scale tank. Dragon Sherman gives it to you. Everything else, all the detailing, which arguably sucks on the Dragon Sherman, I'll be the first to tell you that, but all of that is secondary. The fundamentals are there. Hull, lower hull, turret, running gear. That is why the kits are worth every single dime. But I'm having a TED Talk now. Back to this one over here. Okay, so what's next on this one now, that everything is cut away, and the model truly is at its lightest point now than it will ever be after this point, is to start the rebuild. The rebuild is going to be first sealing off the hull, plugging up the giant hole in the back, giving it a floor, and also skinning the sides. This here will not only make the model stronger, but it's also going to eliminate 90% of the issues that this model has in this current configuration. On top of that, the superstructure is also going to be getting some improvements, and you'll see exactly what those will be when that video does make its debut. However, as I usually say, that's best for a topic for another day. And with that, that wraps up this project update video for my 1/6 scale M4A3E4 Sherman tank. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale project update videos like this one over here, or my other smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get posted. Another way to keep in the loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of this particular build that have been posted since the project start. Well, kind of is the project start at this point, but point still stands. As well as photographs of the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. See you there.